There's a second one. Move that out of the way. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Ismay. Can we pick up where we left off at poll 302 6572? And we were looking at the distribution list on the front of your report. Can I look to the list of 11 people to whom it was CC'd? Mark Burley, the head of projects in IT. Mike Granville, the head of regulatory relations. Leslie Sewell, the head of the IT group. Does that mean head of group IT?
No, that's because the page breaks have gone with the...
Okay.
Yeah, so it's actually group is attached to RM next to Rob.
For Rob Wilson,
yes.
head of criminal law, Royal Mail Group.
That's correct.
Okay. Andy McLean, head of service delivery. Mandy Talbot, principal lawyer civil. John Scott, head of security. Keith Woolard, head of compliance. Lynn Hobbs, GM network support. What does that mean?
General manager.
Michelle Graves, executive correspondence manager. Who was Michelle Graves? Whose office was she in? She was the executive correspondence manager.
I don't. Should either have been in legal or sort of general secretarial support to the executive.
To the executive team?
Yeah, yeah.
Sue Huggins, head of network planning and change. Was that your choice of people to whom the report should be CC'd?
No, I think that came out of speaking with, when Dave asked for the report, and I had conversations with Mike about it, Mike Young. I think that group of people was ones where either I felt they were people who would have relevant input to make, or they may have been suggested to me as people to speak to. I can't remember whether... I think that would have been an agreement, probably with me and Mike and Dave, that this was the relevant audience to ensure that, if you like, all bases were covered within speaking to relevant teams.
So that's not just a list of people to whom the report was CC'd, it's a list of people to whom you would have spoken in order to write the report?
Yeah, so either those people or somebody who reports to them that they suggested I be speaking to.
It's effectively the top slice of senior managers in the post office, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It hasn't got, for example, anybody from marketing, but yes, it's a segment that these would all be part of the senior leadership, yeah.
There's nobody there whose job description is given as being in charge of audit, is there?
I think that the branch audit team at the time reported into Keith Woolard as head of compliance.
Would you agree that internal auditors would be a vital source of assurance within the corporation?
Yes.
It would have been their job to conduct any internal investigation of this sort that would justify senior managers' confidence, wouldn't it?
If an audit was being asked for, then yes, it would be. If somebody was asking for, can you give me some reasons for assurance, that might range from asking an individual for some reasons for assurance. It might mean asking somebody to collate things with a wider audience, or it might mean initiating an audit, which, yes, would mean asking the head of audit to do it.
Can we look at page 19, please? And look at the bottom part of the page, at paragraph 4C. Under the cross-heading independent review and audit angles, you say Pole has actively considered the merits of an independent review. This has been purely from the perspective that we believe in Horizon, but that a review could help others, give others the same confidence that we have. And you continue our decision between IT, legal P&BA, Security and Press Office has continued to be that no matter what opinions we obtain, people will still ask what if, and the defence will always ask questions that require answers beyond the report. Further, such a report would only have merit as at the date of creation and would have to be updated at the point at which Horizon or the numerous component platforms were upgraded. Ernst & Young and Deloitte are both aware of the issue from the media, and we've discussed the pros and cons of reports with them. Both would propose significant caveats and would have limits on their ability to stand in court. Therefore, we've not pursued this further. You say in the first sentence there, Pol has actively considered the merits of an independent review. Who within Pol actively considered the merits of an independent review?
I think that the discussion between all the representatives of the teams on the first page, people within those areas at some point had questioned whether a review was needed and decided that it wasn't because they were confident for all the other reasons as stated that one wasn't appropriate.
So it's the 14 people on the first page have actively considered the merits of an independent review, is that right?
Somebody in their teams had.
I'm sorry?
Somebody in their teams had. I'm not saying, and I don't know if those 14 named individuals were the specific people who'd done this, but people in Post Office had considered it. I can't remember who the people were specifically who'd done that.
When was that active consideration of the merits of an independent review done? Was it done for the purposes of writing this review or on another occasion?
No, I think that goes back earlier than this review because clearly the allegations had been raised for a much longer time than the couple of weeks that I referred to as the period for this report.
So you're referring to a process going back in time on disparate occasions involving different people?
Yeah. Yes.
Was a record made of any of those decisions on a previous occasion by any of the 14 people listed on page 1 or people within their departments of the merits of conducting an independent review and the reasons not to conduct an independent review?
I don't know if a record was made, and I can't remember if a record was made, apart from one email that you've shared with me where there's mention of Rob Wilson's views about that situation in another document.
Is that the only record that you are aware of that records the decision-making as to why not to conduct an independent review?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Who from IT, legal, P&BA, security and the press office made the decision that's referred to in paragraph 2?
I don't know who the specific people were who did that, but whether it was the people I've addressed the document to or members of their teams.
You make no mention there of internal audit being involved in the discussions that led to the decision or the decision itself, do you?
No.
Would you not want your own specialist internal auditors to advise you and to contribute meaningfully to a decision about whether or not to engage external auditors?
Yes, probably yes, yeah.
Can you explain why it was important to involve the press office in decision making but not involve the internal auditors?
No, I can't. I think the press office were receiving questions which would evolve and so I think the press office sometimes received question A and answered question A and then question B came back, which would have kind of led to the narrative in here of if we answer something another question will come up. So the press office I think would have been involved in this because of their experience of perhaps letters that were coming in, correspondence, Freedom of Information Act requests perhaps.
That explains your justification for their involvement. Why not internal audit contributing to a decision about whether to get an audit?
So that's a failing in the scope of that. Yeah, they possibly should have been involved.
But why weren't they?
I don't know. I think in the approach that I adopted to collating this thing, I looked at lots of different angles, and there's always things that one doesn't do because one does so many things and hasn't got the capacity to cover every angle and doesn't think of it. And I'm sorry in the circumstances of everything that's happened here, but I'm sure all of us have done things where we've done 9 things and then you think, oh, I wish I'd done that 10th thing, and I hadn't. And none of us would say, well, I don't know why I didn't do that 10th thing. I wish I'd done that 10th thing.
Might it be because if you ask the auditors, they would say, yes, it would be a good idea to get an external audit in?
No.
Can you help us through your thought process? We need to decide whether to get an external audit. Shall we ask our internal auditors to offer their view? No. Shall we ask the press office? Yes. What did your mind do to lead you to that chain of logic?
I don't know.
The purpose of such an external review, would you agree from the second sentence of the first paragraph there, you seem to be suggesting that the purpose of any independent investigation would be to seek to persuade others of Horizon's reliability?
Yes, that's what I've said, to give others the same assurance that the organisation felt it had got.
So it would be an exercise in convincing others of its reliability rather than actually seeking to establish whether Horizon was reliable?
I think in the process of assuring others as to why it worked, one probably would go through what things possibly don't work and why is that assertion wrong, or what is being done to fix it if there was something came out that was proven to be a problem.
But you'll agree that the way this is written doesn't suggest you approach the question of external review from the a position of let's actually find out whether it's reliable.
No, and that goes back, I think, to the concept of this whole report being commissioned from a point of view of saying, clearly there's a number of allegations being made, but what are the counter-arguments for assurance within the organisation? And that kind of mindset has probably rippled through a number of things that I've written in here.
You give us the reasons why an independent investigation was ruled out. 2, essentially. External auditors would insist on caveats. And then secondly, that would limit what they would be able to say in court.
That's what I've written, yes, yes.
Why would external auditors insist on caveats?
The nature of audit reports is, I think, always that there are caveats in audit reports.
Why is an audit report ever written then, if it always contains a caveat?
There are people who would question whether the whole approach to audit reports is effective, and that is an industry question that regularly rears its head.
You're saying specifically here, these caveats mean that it's not worth the candle in obtaining an external independent review, aren't you?
I think what this is saying is that if something was obtained and it had caveats on it, that's inevitably going to lead to a question of, well, what if? And therefore it wasn't going to, feeling that a caveated report would not prove to conclude anything.
They wouldn't be inappropriately assisting on caveats.
But it wouldn't be inappropriate.
No. They would be inserting appropriate caveats, wouldn't
that
they?
would be totally appropriate caveats for an auditor to put into something, but an audience reading something which has caveats always thinks, well, what's that caveat in there, and what does that mean about the value of a report when it's caveated?
So you are giving us a reason for not commissioning an independent review that the public might misinterpret a caveat. Is that what it amounts to?
Well, I think that's what it does amount to, but I'd also say that what's in here has come from me speaking to quite a lot of people across the organisation to collate this, so these aren't specifically, this is not me saying this is it, this is a collective view coming out of all the conversations that I've had there.
Did you speak to your internal auditors to understand what external independent auditors would insist on by way of caveats?
So I don't think I spoke to internal auditors in this, except that in the addressee audience, whatever the scope of the Post Office internal audit team at that point was reported through to the head of compliance, and therefore the audience for this does include a team which includes the Post Office internal audit function.
What were the caveats, the appropriate caveats that Ernst & Young or Deloitte would insist on if they were to conduct a system audit?
I can't remember what caveats they would have said they would have put on it. But
what are the possibilities?
Well, the possibilities for what caveats one might put on would be auditors will sometimes be commissioned to do pieces of work where the scope of the work will say we will be asking questions but not testing, or there will be a scope of work where people are doing testing, and the scope of work may involve sample testing, it may involve other forms of testing, and there would be different scenarios where a scope of work would have those different parameters going in within it, and an auditor would caveat their report to clarify the extent to which they had or had not tested something, or had not documented processes, or had not spoken to whatever range of functions within an organisation.
So all entirely appropriate things?
Oh, yes. Those would be quite appropriate things to put in, yeah.
So Ernst & Young and Deloitte doing the appropriate thing is a reason not to commission them?
No, I think that the view here was that those would be appropriate caveats to be putting in. However, somebody else reading such a report would inherently think, oh, it's caveated. And whilst we are both professionals, and the people in this room are professionals who have got an understanding of caveats that go into some of these legal documentation reports and opinions, not everyone would, and some people would soundbite items out of it to say that a narrowing of scope was for inappropriate reasons.
What were the limits on their ability to stand in court?
I don't know.
You wrote it, please help us.
Yes, I've written that based on conversations with many people, and I would expect that a comment about limitations on ability to stand in court is not something that I've got the experience or qualification to comment on, and certainly wouldn't randomly write something. That must have come from a conversation with someone from a legal background who's indicated that, and I don't know who that was.
So a lawyer has told you this?
Well, in the addressee audience for the thing, you can see I've got some teams there who would include some lawyers, yes. So somebody has said that, and I have included that in the narrative that's in this report, yes.
That's not included from your knowledge as an auditor at Ernst & Young?
From my recollection of doing audits at Ernst & Young, I haven't got something in my mind that says what's going to limit my ability to stand in court there, no.
Did you pursue what that could possibly mean? If we commission Ernst & Young or Deloitte, there would be limitations on their ability to stand in court. What on earth does that mean?
Right, well, as we sit here, I don't know. I don't know whether I asked at the time, but in the time window that I did have to collate this report, I did put a huge amount of time in within that window to collate this, and there will have been lots of things that I didn't have time to do, and whether I failed to even think of asking the question, or didn't have time, or had an answer and forgot what it is, I don't know.
Did it cross your mind that it might be dripping in irony to say we can't commission an independent review because the person that writes it has limitations on their ability to stand in court to speak to the investigation of our IT system. We're using that IT system to prosecute people and send them to prison.
No, I don't think so. I think possibly from a point of view of our external auditors who were Ernst & Young there, they would have conflicts of interest rules of what things they could be involved in. They were clearly signing off an audit report on the financial accounts of the company. I don't know whether to be asked to perform a piece of work like this would have had a conflict of interest in it that would have prevented them doing that.
That's the reason that you don't give, ironically enough.
Well, there's
Yeah,
lots...
is it?
I know, well, I'm talking from my knowledge here, and you're prompting a number of things that haven't come into my head either at all or for many years. So I appreciate I'm maybe saying something that wasn't in this report and wasn't in my witness statement, but the nature of what you're doing is prompting my memory or thoughts on some things in a way that I haven't had before, and that's what the purpose of this inquiry is. So.
Even if that was a material consideration operative on your mind at the time, we can't ask E1 to do it because they would feel conflicted given their role as standing auditors to us.
Well,
The answer to that would be, well, let's ask one of the other big five, wouldn't it?
Well, and maybe we did. I don't know.
Did you ask any of the other big five?
I don't know.
No, did you?
No.
Are you aware of anyone asking?
I think there was consideration of other firms.
By who?
I think the finance director.
Right. When did the finance director give consideration to involving any of the big five, as I've called them, in conducting an independent audit or review of the Horizon IT system?
I think in the other document that we've got in here, when we get on to Deloitte's had done a report at some point, there was consideration of who could do that report, and clearly Deloitte's were appointed to do that.
Yes, no, I'm talking about now, by August 2010.
I don't know.
Are you aware by August 2010 of anyone giving consideration to bringing in any of the big five?
Right, so in that time, I don't know. No.
You deploy as another argument for not seeking an independent report that it would, quote, only have merit as at the date of creation. Yes?
Yes, yes.
You would agree that that applies to every audit report?
Yes, yes.
Would you agree, therefore, that the logic of what you're saying is that there are never grounds for seeking an independent investigation into an issue or a system because the report's only as good as the day it's written?
Yes and no. So the reason that I say no is that a lot of audit reports are issued on the financial statements up to a particular point in time, and it's quite appropriate that one still issues an audit opinion on 31st of March accounts, even if you do it in September, because it's an audit report on 31st of March accounts. This, however, was considering a system, and it wasn't a particular date in time for the system, it was a system. So I think it's a different context for different types of audit reports.
Isn't it the case that the three reasons that you give here don't add up to a row of beans, and the real reason you didn't want to commission an independent audit report is that you were worried about what it might show?
No. The reasons, whilst the reasons may not look very good in there, those were the reasons.
Why don't they look very good?
Well, you're clearly challenging me on the quality of these things. They don't add up to a row of beans.
My opinion is neither here nor there. I'm asking you, were these the true reasons why you didn't go and get an external report?
Yeah.
Wasn't it that you were worried that it might be disclosable in criminal proceedings?
No.
That was not a consideration at all?
That was no.
Can we look, please? In fact, before we come to that, can we just look at the bottom of the page? You say the external audits that E&Y perform does include tests of Pol's IT and finance control environment.
Yeah.
But the audit scope and materiality mean that E&Y would not give a specific opinion on the systems from this.
Yes.
And so you're making clear there that as at August 2010, Ernst & Young weren't themselves in a position to offer any opinion on the reliability or integrity of Horizon by reason of the standing audit functions they performed.
Yes, I think I'm saying that they were, from the nature of the work that they'd done, they were able to give an opinion on the financial statements of the company. And that was the scope of what they were doing. They weren't in a position to comment on anything other than the engagement letter of what they were appointed to do and what their work had been conducted for the financial statements.
And so the Post Office knew by this time that Ernst & Young's audits could not be used as a justification of the integrity of the system, correct?
Yes, their statutory audits for the years wouldn't, yeah.
And equally, you would presume that Ernst & Young would know the converse of that they hadn't been conducting a statutory audit that would itself examine the integrity of the Horizon system.
Yes, yeah.
Can we look, please, at poll 302082? Poll 402082. Thank you very much. This is a briefing pack raised in preparation for a meeting with Lord James R. Buthnott, as he became, and Oliver Letwin MP, that was scheduled for the 17th of May 2010, yes?
Yes.
And you recall that you were part of the poll team
I do.
for that meeting?
I was sat in reception at Old Street when the meeting happened.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes, I was in London when the meeting happened. I wasn't in the meeting, but I was in London when it happened.
Ah, you didn't attend the meeting? No. Can we just look at page 2, please? You see under case review, you're listed. Did that mean that you got sight of these documents?
I think so. I can't remember the document itself, but I think I would have had sight of it, yeah.
Thank you. And if we go forward to page 3, please, the section of the document headed key messages. And then if we continue on, there are lots of key messages to page 6, please, which is one of the key messages to get across to James R. Buthnott and Oliver Letwin. And you see that it was proposed that that's Alice Perkins, should speak to this. And one of the key messages to get over was we are considering commissioning an independent audit as an assurance measure, but in light, I'm going to read in, of the fact that there is no evidence that there is a problem. We need to determine if this is a good use of public money. Was money a factor in deciding not to commission an independent audit in 2010?
I don't remember money being a topic of discussion.
The points you've listed were threefold. Caveats: the auditors couldn't stand in court, or their ability to stand in court would be limited, and an audit's only good for the day that it's written.
Yeah.
You don't mention this money as being one of them.
No.
Was it ever discussed with you for the purposes of writing your August 2010 review?
I don't remember it being discussed, no.
Thank you. Can we go, please, to poll 0010 6867, please? And can we go to page 3? And if we scroll down to the email from Mr. Hayward, we can see a date of email of the 26th of February 2010. And I think we can see amongst the distribution list, second is you.
Yes, yes.
And the subject is challenges to Horizon. We can see who this is from. If we just scroll down and a bit more. You have to go over a page, there's a blank page. From Andy Hayward, a senior fraud risk program manager within the security team. Do you remember Mr. Hayward?
Yes.
Was he somebody who reported to you?
No, but I think in my first role for those first 3 years, I think Andy was part of one of those teams back then. Not a direct report to me, though.
But by 2010 he wasn't, because you've moved on to PMBA. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
And so looking back at the top of the email then, now we've seen who it's written from, it reads, all following our conference call of today, that's presumably the 26th of February, below is a brief summary of the agreed key activities to progress the next steps in relation to the above piece of work. 1, AH, who would that be? Himself?
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
And MT, is that Mandy Tolbert?
I think so.
To provide Sue Lowther
Yes.
and Dave King
Yeah.
with information on past and present cases with reference to the Horizon challenges, criminal and civil cases. Note, I've asked the fraud team to review approximately the past 2 or 3 years' case files, although these challenges are of a more recent nature. 2, inform security, Sue Lowther and Dave King, sorry, information security, Sue Lowther and Dave King, to conduct initial investigations and provide terms of reference outlining the remit and requirements to carry out a full investigation, including resource timescales and any associated ancillary costs. MB agreement by all that with Dave King and our banking consultant Paul Hallidan, we have far more expertise and knowledge than anyone else is likely to produce for this initial piece of work. Then 3, subject to agreement of 2 above, conduct full investigations into integrity issues with conclusions stroke report provided. Once investigations and conclusions drawn, gain external verification to a level of, to give a level of, quote, external gravitas to respond to these challenges. Recommend Ernst & Young as most suitable partner to complete this, to be advised. Then I don't think there's anything else. Then can we look at the response to this, please, and go back to page 1. I should say that that email chain is forwarded on to Rob Wilson, the head of criminal law, and this is his reply. We can see that he's cut you from the distribution list along with others. Can you see you've disappeared?
I can see Rebecca's name's there in half, so I don't know whether there's distribution list in the email but missing from. Sometimes the window doesn't show all the addressees. So I don't know whether my name is or isn't, but it's a bit odd that Rebecca's name's only half there.
I see, I understand.
Yeah.
He says, Dave, that's Dave Posnett. What role did Dave Posnett perform?
He'd got a role in the security team. Not sure exactly what role it was looking back. I don't know whether he was kind of a manager of the investigators or commercial security.
In an email signature block, he's called the fraud risk manager.
Right.
In any event, Mr. Wilson, head of criminal law, says, if it's thought there is a difficulty with Horizon, then clearly the action set out in your memo is not only needed, but is imperative. I think we'd all agree with that. The consequence, however, will be that to commence or continue to proceed with any criminal proceedings will be inappropriate. My understanding is that the integrity of Horizon data is sound, and it is as a result of this that persistent challenges that have been made in court have always failed. These challenges are not new and have been with us since the inception of Horizon, as it's always been the only way that defendants are left to challenge our evidence when they've stolen money or when they need to show that our figures are not correct. What's being suggested is that an internal investigation is conducted. Such an investigation will be disclosable as undermining evidence on the defence in the cases proceeding through the criminal courts. Inevitably, the defence will argue, if we're carrying out an investigation, we clearly do not have confidence in Horizon, and therefore to continue to prosecute will be an abuse of the criminal process. Alternatively, we could be asked to stay the proceedings pending the outcome of the investigation. If this were to be adopted, the resultant adverse publicity could lead to massive difficulties for Pol. If this were, as it would be seen by the press and media to vindicate the current challenges. The potential impact is, however, is much wider for Pol, in that every office in the country will be seen to be operating a compromised system with untold damage to the business. Our only real alternative to avoid adverse publicity will be to offer no evidence on each of our criminal cases. This should mitigate some adverse publicity, but it's not a total guarantee. To continue prosecuting alleged offenders, knowing that there is an ongoing investigation to determine the veracity of Horizon, could also be detrimental to the reputation of my team. If we were to secure convictions in the knowledge that there was an investigation, where the investigation established a difficulty with the system, we will be open to criticism and appeal to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal will inevitably be highly critical of any prosecutor's decision to proceed against defendants in the knowledge that there could be an issue with the evidence. What we really need to do is impress on Fujitsu the importance of fully cooperating in the provision of technical expertise and witness statements to support the criminal and civil litigation now and in the future. Given the nature of the discussions that took place on the 26th of February, I'm staggered I wasn't invited to take part in the conference. Can we go to page 9 of this email chain, please? Remembering that the original conference call was on the 26th of February. The head of criminal law's intervention was on the 3rd of March. And if we scroll down, please, we can now see an email chain of the 8th of March in which you're included.
Yes.
It says, as was discussed on the conference call, and taking into account Rob's comments, to confirm that what we are looking at is a general due diligence exercise on the integrity of Horizon to confirm our belief in the robustness of the system and thus rebut any challenges. So it seems as if there was a further conference call.
Looks like it, yeah.
In the light of what Mr. Wilson had said.
Yep, that's what it says, yep.
And the position had changed. You were now looking to conduct a general due diligence exercise which would confirm our belief in the robustness of the system. That's what you did, wasn't it?
yeah, I guess that was listing those things for Dave, was listing out reasons for belief in the robustness of the system, yeah.
So now there's going to be no full examination of horizon integrity issues, is there?
No, looks like it, yeah.
There's going to be no third-party involvement, is there?
No.
Instead, the exercise has as its object the confirmation of the robustness of the system in order to rebut any challenges, doesn't it?
Yeah.
These are essentially your terms of reference, aren't they?
I suppose it does look like that, yeah.
And they're loaded, aren't they? They tell you what your conclusion should be.
I'm not sure what my conclusion should be from that.
Write a report that confirms our belief in the robustness of the system in order that we might rebut any challenges to it.
Well, and that, I mean, that was what the essence of what Dave's request was. Dave was hearing lots of allegations against the system. I haven't seen a list of issues on the other side, so please can you gather all those issues so I can get a balanced picture of it. Dave hasn't, and I don't think Dave used the word rebut any challenges. So I agree the report that I compiled was about confirming the belief in the robustness of the system.
This is essentially an early genesis of your task, isn't it?
Well, I think you can see some phrases in there that have fed through to my report, yeah. So in my report, I've used phrases about staying, for example, which are phrases that could only have come from somebody with a legal background because I don't know about staying prosecutions. So there's a consistency of narrative that's coming through there, but whether that was a separate conversation in September, December, when was it, August, that report was written, I don't know whether that was a separate conversation or at the time this same thing informing it.
What I'm suggesting to you is that this is essentially your commission.
Well, that's not a commission to me to do the review that Dave asked me to do.
You would agree that the first paragraph is the polar opposite of an independent and objective analysis, the conclusions of which are driven by the evidence.
Yes, that first paragraph ending with to rebut any challenges is not a balanced. Yes, I agree, yeah.
And the conclusion that you were to reach in your report is written there in the first paragraph, isn't it? And you duly delivered on it, didn't you?
I think that was common language that was used for a long time about the integrity of Horizon. So, yes, I've issued a report that's got that phraseology in it. But the phraseology about reasons for assurance about the Horizon system and the integrity of Horizon, I think were phrases that were used quite a lot over a number of years.
Was that a common mindset within senior managers at the post office at this time? When we conduct an investigation or a review or a due diligence exercise, we should do so with a preconceived and fixed belief in the outcome. And we should gather evidence to support that preconceived fixed belief.
I don't think that was the mindset, but inevitably there's a danger that that is how it manifests itself.
Can we go back to your report, please?
Before we do, Mr. Beer, can I just ask a detail? This email was sent to David X. Smith.
Yes.
Are there two David Smiths? I don't want to confuse myself over who's who.
Yes, there are. So
which David Smith is this then, please?
This is David Smith, head of IT.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not the David Smith who commissioned you?
No, this isn't
Right,
managing
all right,
director.
thank you. I just want to be clear that I'm not losing track of which Smith is Smith.
No, it's a good point. Yeah.
Can we go back to your report? That's poll 3026572. Thank you. And look at page 19, please, where we were. And go to the foot of the page. We just read the paragraph at the bottom about Ernst & Young, yes?
Yes, yes.
And then go over the page to page 20, please. You say, I think this is what you were referencing a moment ago, it's important to be crystal clear about any review if one were commissioned. Any investigation would need to be disclosed in court. Although we would be doing the review to comfort others, any perception that Pole doubts its own systems would mean that all criminal prosecutions would have to be stayed. It would also beg a question for the Court of Appeal over past prosecutions and imprisonments. From whom did you get that information?
That narrative would have come from speaking to somebody in the criminal law team. And it's consistent phraseology with what was in that email that you just showed, so I imagine it probably came from a conversation with Rob.
I.e. Mr. Wilson?
Most likely.
So did he make it crystal clear to you that any independent review would need to be disclosed in court?
Yes, and I think that's what he was saying in that other thing that other email that you showed a few minutes ago.
Did you know why all prosecutions would need to be stayed? Because an independent review was being carried out?
I didn't know the legalities of why that would mean that other prosecutions should be stayed. No, I was taking a message from the legal team that was their description of what would happen. But I guess as a layman, the concept of if there was an issue, then I can kind of understand why this is the outcome view of it. But this would be a message coming from a lawyer. I'm not qualified and wouldn't have written something like that without it having come from somebody who was qualified to say that.
Did you understand why the mere fact of carrying out an independent review, irrespective of the conclusions that it reached, call into question all past prosecutions and imprisonments?
I'm not sure that I did understand the reason why. I understood that was the outcome that was being explained. But again, to a layman's perspective, I'm not sure why Commissioner Review would do that, but this was a clear legal message that I was receiving and that I've included in here.
Why did you understand that it was permissible to keep your report secret, but it wouldn't be for an independent one?
I'm not sure that I did understand that it was permissible to keep my report secret.
So you thought that your report would be disclosed in ongoing criminal proceedings, did you?
I don't think that even went through my mind.
You didn't think, again, to whom might this report be disclosed? Therefore, I need to write it in a way with the possible audience in mind.
No, and that may have been a failure in how I've gone about collating this thing, but I don't think I thought through that, and I think I worked on a priority basis of having received a request from the Managing Director to compile a list of these reasons, which I did, and what you suggested would be a perfectly reasonable challenge to have had in mind at the start of it, but I don't think I did have that in mind. I think I was working on the Managing Director has asked for this, and that is what I'm going to do.
Was it only Mr. Wilson's advice that you acted on that an independent review would lead to prosecutions being stayed and a question mark being raised over past prosecutions and imprisonments, or was any other lawyer involved?
I don't know whether any other lawyer was involved in there, but I think that would have It wouldn't have come from me because, as I say, that's kind of legal narrative that I wouldn't have the knowledge to be able to have written. Exactly who in legal it did come from, I don't know, but the addressee that I've got on there as the prime contact was Rob, so it would either have been him or one of his team that I would have had that conversation with.
Did you think if a review, an independent review, comes back saying the Horizon system is sound, that the data it produces enjoys full integrity, that would lead to prosecutions being stayed and question marks being raised over past prosecutions?
I don't know, but as I sit here and think, if you're asking if we had a report that said the system works, would that lead to staying things? Well, I wouldn't think that if a report came back and said things were fine, I'm not sure why that would cause things to be stayed.
Or was instead the decision not to obtain an independent review motivated by a belief that it might be unfavourable?
No, I think I've got the 3 reasons that I thought at the time that I've put into this document, and that was the reasons.
And you and the people that you've listed thought that it was better not to inquire, better not to find out, and instead potentially to secure more convictions and more imprisonments?
No. Although the thought process in hindsight looks like it was the wrong thought process to have gone through, I think me and the recipients of this report and the contributors to the report all rightly or wrongly thought Horizon was reliable.
Do you agree that this paragraph is a warning to the Post Office that if it was to take certain action, i.e. to commission a review, then the Post Office may be heading in a direction which may lead to the discovery that innocent people may have been wrongly convicted?
But yes, this statement clearly is a warning, and indeed the outcome of why we're here today has kind of referenced this in Justice Fraser's judgment, I believe.
If the Post Office had nothing to fear, surely there's nothing to lose in securing the seal of approval on that view from an independent body, is there?
Well, I would agree with you that it would feel like there would be no reason not to secure an independent seal of approval. However, I've received advice from a legal team here that says it would mean that these are, this is what could arise.
Was your own view, having such a high level of confidence in Horizon, dependent, at least in part, on the assessment by Fujitsu of its own product?
Yes, in part. Yes.
Did you realise the fallibility of asking the very organisation that may have been responsible for the provision of a faulty product, whether it assessed that its own product was faulty?
No.
Allowing Fujitsu to mark its own homework?
No, I could see what you mean, but no, that didn't, and I don't think that crossed a number of people's minds.
If we look at Appendix 3, please, which is page 31. Was this the extent of the Fujitsu assessment of its own product that was communicated to you for the purposes of your review?
Yes, I think so.
Did you think at the time this document has got limitations to it?
I don't think I did, and that may have been a failing that in how I went about it. But no, I don't think I did think about limitations on it, no.
To start with, it was written without prejudice. Can you see that at the top?
Yes.
Did you stop to think why it was being written without prejudice?
No, don't think so.
Secondly, nowhere in Mr. Jenkins' document does it say this is the position of the company, does it?
I don't know, but I agree with you if it doesn't.
No. The document isn't the company speaking. This is our formal position of Fujitsu Services Limited, having taken a broad spectrum of reviews and considered the position carefully. This is simply a document that Mr. Jenkins has written.
Well, it may have been, but I would have expected that a letter going from one organisation to another like this would not have been a sole voice in speaking in isolation. I would expect that this would have been a view that he was satisfied was a representative view of his organisation.
Did you think this document had been provided for the purposes of your review, knowing the use to which it would be put?
I don't know how this document's dated 2009, which is a year before the reports that I collated.
Which is why I'm asking you these questions.
So I don't know what the genesis was of how this thing was. Well, I don't know how it was that that Gareth
Did you think
decided or was commissioned to write this. I don't know.
Did you think, I'm relying on a document, the purpose of which I do not know, which is headed without prejudice, which says in paragraph 1, again, it's submitted without prejudice, and therefore it may be a shaky basis on which to reach conclusions?
Well, rightly or wrongly, you've shared this with me in the briefing pack. I have looked at this document a few times as part of my papers, and rightly or wrongly, I've never even noticed that wording at the top. It's obviously is at the top of the page, but where it says commercial in confidence, my eyes looking at this document, I've always gone straight into, oh, it's Gareth Jenkins, let's read purpose and go down. I know that might sound stupid, but I have not even, until you've said to me it says without prejudice on it, I haven't noticed it says without prejudice on it.
Did you notice that from the second paragraph under 1 purpose, the purpose of the document is described as being a technical description of the measures that are built into Horizon to ensure data integrity, including a description of several failure scenarios and descriptions as to how these measures apply in each case, rather than an assessment of the integrity of data that Horizon produces? It's a technical description of measures designed to ensure data integrity. It doesn't speak to whether or not such data integrity had in fact been achieved, does it?
No, so I can see that doesn't say this is an audit of the system, for example. I can see it doesn't say that. Whether I saw that at the time when I looked at it, I don't know, but I probably would have seen that this just says it's a technical description. But in seeking assurance from different parties, and me asking IT, who must have provided this to me when I asked IT, all I could do was ask different parts of the organisation to explain to me the reasons why they've got assurance in it. And in many areas, and typically that would mean that a team would come up with a description of the processes and controls in their environment, or a technical description of their area. I don't think anybody would have got something that would come forward with, unless there'd recently been an internal audit review of that particular process. I don't think anybody would have got something that would have met the standard that you're describing of presenting something that says, and this has just been tested, for example. I think most things that get shown to somebody are a description of it, and then there's a judgment about, right, are we going to test this or not?
When you read this document, did you think this doesn't address any of the bugs, errors and defects that we know about?
Well, I'd narrated earlier in this report the 4 or 5 things that I was aware of, like barcode sticking. I can see this doesn't refer to those, but I don't think I thought, yeah.
You were aware by this time of the Calendar Square bug, weren't you?
I don't know. I don't know if I was of that. I was aware of whatever the 5 things were that I've listed out earlier in that report.
You're referring to page 15, I think.
Will somebody bring that document up?
Yeah. If we go to page 15, please. Known IT issues and their non-applicability to the allegations made.
Yes, so
then B, barcode sticking,
Yeah.
bottom of the page, non-polling, over the page, file delivery failures, and number 5, Horizon, poll FS differences.
Yes.
By this time, there were 10 bugs that were known about. I want to understand whether you knew about them. A bug called the receipts and payments mismatch bug.
That's a bug that I was aware of, but I think that is later than this document.
I'm sorry, I think
that's at a later date.
No, I think by August 2010 it was known about. Was it known about by you by August 2010?
Oh, I think it was later than that.
What about the remming in bug?
I don't know, what was that?
I'm asking you whether you remember.
I don't. No,
No.
I don't. No.
The reversals bug,
No.
the data tree build failure bug.
No.
You hadn't heard of any of those?
No. Well, I don't know if I can't remember them.
You say just before the break, if we can examine this in your witness statement, please. At paragraph 40. Which is on page 11, sorry, the bottom of page 10. The report suggested that Post Office was justified to assume the losses at audit were due to theft. This statement was based on the understanding that poll management still did not have serious concerns about the integrity of Horizon, and so their view regarding the past cases would not have changed it. It was also made in the light of the range of controls and mitigations noted throughout the document. At that time, the belief was that the overwhelming evidence pointed to human error with respect to shortfall, that there was no independent expert evidence suggesting a serious problem with Horizon, and that Poll had invested considerably in mitigations, including training and support. But what was the overwhelming evidence that problems were the result of human error?
The overwhelming evidence was the outcome of branch audits and the confidence in the system itself. Clearly, this inquiry and the allegations have made challenge that presumption, but and the allegations here clearly have challenged the basis of the branch audits. But I think the outcome of those audits, including where people were understood to have made confessions at the start of an audit, even before cash was counted, and I know that's not in every case, but those sorts of things were the matters that were deemed to be overwhelming evidence, even though now one may say, well, perhaps they weren't right.
You give us a reason for Post Office being justified to assume that losses were due to theft, that there wasn't any independent expert evidence suggesting a serious problem with Horizon. You had been party to a decision not to seek such independent evidence, hadn't you?
Well, yes.
How
For the
could
reasons that were quoted in that earlier response.
Can we go finally on this topic then to your conclusions as expressed in the report? That's back to poll 302-6572, foot of the page under executive summary. You say in the second line of the executive summary, we remain satisfied this money was missing due to theft in branch. We do not believe the account balances against which the audit's concerned were corrupt. And then in the paragraph underneath that, in the third sentence, Horizon Online builds on this and brings benefits to running costs and change management. That must mean the introduction of Horizon Online, is not being done because of any doubt about the integrity of Horizon. So not only were you satisfied, is this right, that any discrepancies shown at audit were not down to Horizon, you were satisfied that the money had been stolen rather than being missing through error or mistake, is that right?
Yes.
On what basis did you remain satisfied that all money that was missing had been stolen?
On the basis that a provable reason as to why it wasn't identified. So my understanding would be that during looking at a particular incident in a branch, there would be an opportunity to go back through the transaction logs and query, well, if there's a transaction in here that's not appropriate, which one was it? And certainly in one case, I'm not sure which the office was, but I asked to see the transaction logs for a particular office, and there were what I understand were provable cash deliveries of 10 and 15, 20,000 to a branch. The transactions in the branch were low volume and low value, and therefore the cash deliveries to the branch were totally disproportionate to what the level of transactional activity was in the branch. And when the auditors went to the branch, the amount of money that the Horizon system said should be there wasn't there. My understanding was that the records of cash deliveries to the branch were reliable, and therefore if the system was wrong, there'd need to be a significant outpayment to question in there, or a significant in-payment, and there wasn't one in the logs there. The double entry accounting balanced for it, and that was an example of one where I asked the one that I asked to show me, it was probably an ARQ log for it, and that was kind of the sort of thing that was giving me assurance, having looked at a set of records for a branch.
You say in the second paragraph, Horizon is robust, and then reading on, Horizon Online is not being done because of any doubt about the integrity of Horizon.
Yeah.
Do those paragraphs reflect a belief of certainty or close to it in your mind, that you had no doubt whatsoever about the integrity of Horizon?
Yes, so the first one does, and the second one I felt was a totally separate thing, that the world was moving to cloud-based hosted functions. Post Office had been dependent on overnight drops of software to branches, and there was a risk that you'd have data connectivity failures or other things that would, and I think it was more time-consuming and problematic to drop software out to a branch. So the idea of setting up an online data store which branches connected to was the way that many of us are working on cloud technology now, and that was, whether cloud's quite the right word to use it, but the movement from whatever the old system of Horizon was to the new system was just in line with what many organisations all across the world are doing, to go to an online process. So I didn't perceive or understand the deployment of Horizon Online to be anything other than that's the way that all companies are going with the way that their software is hosted.
Just standing back then for a moment from the detail, please, Mr. Ismay. You now know that the Horizon system was significantly compromised by a series of bugs, errors and defects that had the effect of causing accounting discrepancies that were wrongly attributed to the criminal actions of sub-postmasters that led, in some cases, to their conviction and imprisonment. With the benefit of reflection, do you agree that the decision not to commission a fully independent investigation and audit of the Horizon system in 2010, and instead for you to prepare a report that had as its object to demonstrate the robustness and reliability of Horizon, was a crass mistake?
I think, given where we are, we should have been, that probably should have been considered, yeah.
Considered or done? Because it was considered and it was
Yeah,
rejected
yeah.
for some reasons that we see spread across
Yeah.
the documents we've looked at.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting to you, in the light of what we know now, with the benefit of looking back,
In the light of what we know now, yes, yeah.
it was an opportunity missed to discover a decade earlier than we did the flaws of this system and the consequences for your sub-postmasters, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yes, yeah.
So can we take a break, please?
Yeah.
Can we take past, please? Thank you. So just before we proceed with my questions of Mr. Ismay, can we just look on the screen, please, at poll 402082? I showed Mr. Ismay this document, and you'll see that it's dated on this one, 17th of May 2010.
Yes.
And Miss Leake has pointed out to me that I made the same mistake that I made last time I displayed this document, which she also corrected, and I then corrected myself, that this document should be dated or should identify that the meeting was scheduled for the 17th of May 2012, not 2010.
12, right.
There are other iterations of the document which show that it was 2012, not 2010.
Let me just, well, it'll be on, now that you've said what you've said, it'll be on the official transcript. So I don't have to try and find my precise note to correct it. Right, fine.
Thank you, sir, and thank you once again to Miss Leake. I'll try to wait a while before I make it a hat trick. Can we look, please, Mr. Ismay, at poll 3091384. Can you see this is an email chain in which you're not involved, but as we'll notice in a moment, you're mentioned in it. If we start with the foot of the page, please. You'll see that it's an email dated the 3rd of December from Lynn Hobbs. Can you recall who Lynn Hobbs was?
She was a general manager in the Post Office network.
To John Breeden, we can see who he was from his signature block at the top of the page there. And she's forwarding something, the follow-up to Biz meeting on JFSA. And she says, John, this is the last email exchange I had with Mike Granville about the Biz meeting. The attached documents were what Mike was proposing to send to Biz, and I commented as below. Haven't seen anything further, but I did have a conversation with Mike about the whole remote access to Horizon issue. This was being looked into by Andy McLean and Mark Burley. The view being expressed was that whilst this may be possible, it's not something we have asked Fujitsu to provide. I don't know what the final outcome was. I'm forwarding 2 further emails, one from Rod Ismay, which is the final report he produced as a request from Dave Smith, MD, to review the whole issue of Horizon integrity. In fact, you weren't issued to review the whole issue of Horizon integrity, were you?
No, but I think the description of the report that I did is described differently in many places. And as you say, that is not, as in people today refer to it as being something much wider.
And then if we go over the page, please. We can see that she cuts into her email an email to Mike and to you. The way she's cut it in doesn't show its date. And she says, I'm happy with the report and have just one observation. I found out this week that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. It came up when we were exploring solutions around a problem generated by the system following a migration to HNGX. This issue was quickly identified and a fix put in place, but it impacted around 60 branches and meant a loss gain incurred in a particular week, in effect disappeared from the system. One solution, quickly discounted because of the implications around integrity, was for Fujitsu to enter a value into a branch account to reintroduce the missing loss gain. So Pol can't do this, but Fujitsu can. The line, I found out this week that Fujitsu can actually put an entry into a branch account remotely. Can you recall when you were told that by her?
I can't, but it's clearly a really important statement, but no, I can't.
And why is it clearly a really important statement?
Because it's saying that something can be put into the branch system, which is something that I'd said, from my understanding of asking people, couldn't happen.
Can you recall whether she told you this really important statement before or after you had finalised your report? You see that she says,
yeah.
I'm happy with the report.
So I can't, there's lots and lots of correspondence here, and there's various things I can't remember, and I can't remember this one, certainly whether it was before or after that report, but I can't remember the email.
If it was before the report, you would have wanted to take it into account?
Yes, I would have, yeah.
If it was after the report, you would want to change what you'd written, wouldn't you?
But yes, yes.
Can we go to your report, please? Poll 302 6572. At the foot of the page, you say the integrity of Horizon is founded on its tamper-proof logs, its real-time backups, and the absence of backdoors. So all data entry or acceptance is at branch level and is tagged against the log on ID of the user. This means that ownership of the accounting is truly at branch level. The email that Lynn sent you undermines the last of those statements, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Why is that statement in there, and why wasn't it changed?
Well, my understanding when I compiled this report and the messages I was getting from IT was that what I've written here was the business understanding when I did this report. I can't remember getting that email that you've shared that came from Lynn, but if I had got it, I would like to think that I would have then said that there was a whole different situation now that kind of overruled what had been in my report that was issued in 2010.
Can you help us then? If the email from Lynn Hobbs had been received before you wrote this entry within the report, why would you not have brought into account what she said, or at least investigated it further?
Well, because I presume that it was after it, but I can't even remember getting it anyway.
If it was after you had written your report, you ought to have amended it, shouldn't you? Revisited the August review, shouldn't you?
Yes, yeah.
Because it was in part founded on a false assertion, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And in the light of what Lynn Hobbs said, you would have thought, I need to undertake a chapter and verse understanding here, or obtain a chapter and verse understanding here, of what Fujitsu is doing with this power that I didn't know that it had. Wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yes, I agree, yes.
If you received the email after you wrote your report, would you have thought, we've got a duty to tell sub-postmasters who have been prosecuted on the basis of supposedly tamper-proof branch accounts, where ownership of the accounting is truly at branch level? In fact, Fujitsu had a power to insert transactions into branch accounts. We need to tell them this.
Yeah, I think if I did indeed receive that email, I would like to think that I would have spoken probably to Rob Wilson and said, here's a change in circumstances here, and then I would have expected the criminal law team to do whatever was necessary as a consequence of that, which most likely would be the path that you've just described.
Can you recall whether Angela van den Boogaard spoke to you in December 2010 after she received the email from Lynn Hobbs, and was your report saying one thing and Lynn Hobbs's email saying another?
No, I can't remember, no.
If we go over the page of this document, in the third paragraph, you say, when Pole takes a sub-postmaster to court, we have strong processes for the compilation of evidence. Compassionate factors are borne in mind, and we have a high success rate. This does depend on ensuring that the courts focus on the facts of transaction logs and not on speculation about the what-ifs. What were the strong processes for the compilation of evidence for court proceedings, please?
I believe that the strong processes were the way in which the audit files were compiled, the way in which the investigations team collated things to provide to the criminal law team to take into court. I don't know what all the specifics of that were, but I believe there were strong processes within there for compiling those case files and evidence that would have been taken into court.
Were those processes that you say were strong written down? I.e., we're thinking of mounting a prosecution. This is the process that must be gone through in order to obtain relevant evidence, to analyse it, to ensure that it has integrity, and to make a fair charging decision.
So I can't remember what there was there, but I would expect that there would have been a sort of a control sheet that would be a template for, if I'm compiling a case, then there'd need to be A, B, C and D that are included within that. So I would have expected that there would have been a kind of a standard structure for compiling a binder or whatever the bundle of information is, however that is presented into court. I'd expect there'd be a template for how that is compiled.
Would you agree that strong processes for taking a sub-postmaster to court ought to include rigorous and objective investigations that are aimed at uncovering the truth?
Yes, I would.
That they ought to include independent decision-making over deciding whether to proceed with a case or not?
Yeah.
They ought to include systems that ensure that all relevant material, whether it assists a sub-postmaster or seeks to prove the allegation against the sub-postmaster, is obtained, secured, and then disclosed to a sub-postmaster.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
What did you do to discover whether those three pillars of a fair investigation and prosecution process in fact existed?
I didn't. I didn't conduct an audit or test the assertions that were put in here.
So does it amount to somebody told you, we have strong processes for the compilation of evidence, and therefore you wrote, we have strong processes for the compilation of evidence?
Yes, I do. And in hindsight, I should possibly have put, rather than having an adjective in front of it, I should possibly have said there are well-documented processes or something about processes, but not strong, because that does imply that me as the writer of this are describing something strong. That was the message that was coming to me from the teams I was talking to, but I don't have a sample of tests to validate that they were indeed strong.
On the face of it, it looks like you're applying your value judgment to the processes, doesn't it?
the collective group of people whose comments I gathered were yes, and I was part of that group.
Did you know whether Gareth Jenkins or any other witness called by the Post Office within civil cases or criminal prosecutions was given any guidance or training by Pol as to what was expected from them in terms of providing data and documentation to support prosecutions?
No, I don't. I would expect that the legal team would have got processes and guidance. Whether it would be appropriate for the Post Office legal team to have talked to a witness from a third-party organisation, I genuinely don't know whether that's appropriate practice or not. So I don't know.
What were the compassionate factors that were borne in mind?
In hindsight, I wouldn't have used that word. The compassionate factors, I'm not sure what they all were, but made conversations, I think, with the network colleagues who I talked to in producing this, that we were compassionate, but I can't give you elements that would substantiate, and frankly, I wish I hadn't used the word in there.
Why did you use it?
Because at the time, that was the sense that I was getting from the people who I was talking to collating this report.
What did they tell you about the compassion that existed in this prosecutor?
I don't know, because I've not documented, and it's so long ago.
What do you think it could be?
I would have thought it would have been about the way in which the audit relationship was during the audit. I would have thought it was about the relationship with the area manager or contract manager for that area. Clearly, you've articulated earlier that some postmasters have said that wasn't the case of their experience of it, and that's just not that's bad that was the experience. But my understanding from speaking to colleagues who were doing those jobs was that they felt things were being done in a compassionate manner, and clearly there's a lot of comment that that's not the case, and that's bad that's bad that that's the case.
Were there any industry standards that you were aware of against which the efficacy and integrity of the Horizon system could be measured?
Probably were. I'm not industry. So PCI standards. I'm aware that the card industry, Mastercard, Visa, Europay, there are PCI standards around the confidentiality and integrity of data in order to assure the holders of credit cards and debit cards about the protection of their information. So the Horizon system, as a system that's connected to a card processing terminal and connected to the Link network, the Post Office was subject to PCI DSS reviews, and so those are industry standards to which there was, I believe, independent assessment of that for accreditation purposes.
Before you prepared this report, was there any discussion amongst you or research undertaken within Pol to consider whether the level of bugs, errors and defects that had been experienced was within expected norms or outside expected norms compared to other integrated network systems?
I don't think so. Don't think so.
Can we turn to a different topic? Thank you. That can come down. Something that was going on at the same time, which was the prosecution of Seema Misra. Can we look, please, at Pol 0005 5100? This is an email exchange between Andrew Wynne, who was, I think, of your department of P&DA.
That's correct.
And John Longman. We'll see that just slightly further down the page. of the 27th of July about the Seema Misra case. Can we start, please, on page 2 of the document? Just scroll down, please. You'll see this is an email from Izzy Hogg. She's a defence solicitor, to Jarnell Singh, who was a senior officer within Pol's criminal law division. Yes?
Yes.
And Miss Hogg says, Jarnell, as a result of the meeting that took place between Charles McLachlan, that's a defence expert, and Gareth Jenkins, as directed by the judge, we now need to have, 1, access to the system in the Midlands, where it appears there are live reproducible errors. 2, access to the operations at Chesterfield in order to understand how reconciliation and transaction corrections are dealt with. 3, access to the system change requests, known error logs, and new release documentation to understand what problems have arisen, what problems have had to be fixed. Please contact me. And if we look up the page, we see, I think, a forwarding. Can you please advise on the 3 points raised below? And then go over the page, back to page 1. Jarnell Singh. I think that email at the foot of the page is just an irrelevant forwarding. Then in the middle of the page, a reply to Andrew Wynne. John, Rod Ismay, the head of P&BA, is not happy at the prospect of an open-ended invite. He's asked me the question of what are the legal parameters we are working within. Simplistically, if we refuse or impose conditions, do we lose the case? I think we need more guidance on how something like this might reasonably operate. We've heard in the inquiry from Mr. Wynne already. He told the chair that he understood your reply. His boss and as head of P&BA was to seek to close down the disclosure request as much as possible. Was that your intention?
No, and I'll explain why. So there were 2 things in here. I would expect the Post Office criminal law team to be overseeing the compilation of the whatever was needed to be submitted, and not for there to be a side conversation between me as part of the organisation with the defence lawyer. I felt that a request should be coming to me from the criminal law team. So first I'd got a concern about, whilst this email chain clearly has John Ale in the email chain, John Ale wasn't asking me and telling me what was required to be submitted. I was being presented by somebody else with a request from a defence solicitor where I didn't know whether the Post Office criminal law team agreed that this was something that needed doing, and therefore I wasn't going to independently start a discussion about something where I'm sure everybody would agree you need a single point of contact who's leading for an organisation in a court case, not for different individuals to separately and randomly start having a conversation with the defence.
So just stopping there on that answer, if we scroll to the bottom of the page, we can see that presumably she's an administrative assistant or similar. She forwards on behalf of Jarnell Singh the email exchange that we saw from Izzy Hogg. And he, Jarnell Singh, says, I enclose a copy of an email received from Izzy Hogg, contents of which is self-explanatory. Can you please be kind enough to let me have your urgent instructions as to the access and information she's requesting? Just pause there. So I'm told that we have a technical issue in that we're not able to broadcast at the moment. And the request was for a 5-minute break, which would have taken us to 4 o'clock, which was the time I think we were going to rise today in any event.
Yeah. Well, I'm prepared to carry on when we haven't got a live transcript, but a live broadcast is a bit different since we're relying on it for the public at large to have access to these proceedings if they want access to these proceedings. So what's the time now, Mr.
5 to 4, or 3:55 as I would call it.
Well, you may or may not be glad to hear, everyone, that I'm proposing to adjourn until tomorrow and not to have a 5-minute break to see if this can be fixed. But I'm doing that on the basis, Mr. Beer, that there will be ample time tomorrow to finish the witness within reasonable time.
And which there will.
Fine. Right. So we will adjourn now until tomorrow. I'd ask you not to talk about your evidence overnight, and hopefully we will be open to public view at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much, sir.